Have you ever heard the phrase, "It's impossible to not communicate"? Meaning, no matter where you are communicating with other people. This is possible because of nonverbal communication. Hi, I'm Greg Rickard, faculty member at Bluegrass Community and Technical College, and welcome to today's key concept presentation on nonverbal communication. In the presentation today, we'll briefly describe what nonverbal communication is, and then take a look at a variety of different types of nonverbal communication, including the face and eyes, body movement, touch, use of voice, use of space, and clothing. Let's start by giving a brief description of what nonverbal communication is. The interplay text by Adler, Rosenfeld, and Proctor define nonverbal communication as non-linguistic communication. Basically what this means is that any communication that happens above and beyond the words or the language that we use. Nonverbal communication is very well suited to conveying relational messages. Remember, every message that we send has both a content dimension and a relational dimension. And nonverbal communication is good at conveying these relational messages, but not always very good at conveying content messages. Nonverbal communication is also good at conveying attitudes, feelings, and emotions. So let's begin our look at types of nonverbal communication by looking at the face and eyes. Facial expressions and eye behavior can convey multiple messages nonverbally. Our facial expressions and eye behavior are often used as regulators, or they help us to determine turn-taking in our interactions. And facial expressions are also very strong at conveying emotions. Our faces contain multiple muscles, and our expressions can change very rapidly. So often facial expression is difficult to decipher. Let's take a look at a few pictures and try to determine what's happening in these pictures, or as far as what types of emotions are being conveyed. If we take a look starting on the top left, and we'll work clockwise around these pictures. The woman in the top left-hand picture, take a look at how wide her eyes are open. Look at the positioning of her mouth, the positioning of her eyebrows, and also she has her hands next to her face. Most of us would probably interpret this picture as someone who is frightened. Moving to the next picture, the gentleman with his hand that's resting on his fist. We can take a look at his facial expressions, especially his mouth, his eyes, the positioning of his eyebrows, and we would probably interpret this person as bored. Moving clockwise down, the next woman is looking up. Her eyes are very wide, her eyebrows are elevated, her mouth is open. We would probably interpret this as surprised, or maybe even frightened. Finally, the woman on the bottom left. Her eyes are looking down. She also has her hand pressed to her forehead. Probably we would convey this as stress or possibly concern. So just a few examples of how the facial expressions that we use can convey a variety of emotions. Let's move now to body movement. The term that's used to refer to the study of body movement is kinesics. And body movement includes the positioning of your body as well as gestures, which is basically movements of the arms and hand. One of the things that we do in body movement often in our interactions is what's called mirroring, or our body movement tends to duplicate the movements of the other person that we're communicating with, both as far as our positioning and as far as our gestures. So if we're speaking with someone and perhaps they lean back and cross their arms, our tendency will be to also lean back and cross our arms. Mirroring behaviors has been shown to increase persuasiveness of messages. Let's take a look at a couple of pictures that illustrate gesture and body movement. One type of gesture that we might use is what's called an emblem. And this is a gesture that replaces a verbal message. So in the left-hand picture, we see a woman giving the thumbs up. In our culture, this is an emblem for good job, or way to go, or everything's fine. However, these emblems are often culturally based, and in some cultures, the thumbs up gesture may have a rude meaning. The picture on the right conveys what's called a manipulator. And this is where one part of our body manipulates the other part of our body. So biting your nails is a type of manipulator. And generally when we see someone biting their nails, we interpret this as someone who is nervous or possibly anxious. Let's move now to the study of touch. Haptics is the word used to describe the study of touch. And what we find in looking at touch is that touch is related very closely to our physical health. And also touch helps to increase compliance or increase persuasiveness. In the interplay text, there's a study that identifies waiters and waitresses who use appropriate touch when delivering the bill to their customers. And when they use touch appropriately, what was found is that the tips of these people were higher for the waiters or waitresses. The messages of touch are also culturally balanced. So let's take a look at a few pictures that demonstrate different types of touch and talk about how we might interpret these messages differently based on cultural rules or expectations. Beginning on the top left, we see two women who are sort of engaged in an embrace. Most likely we would interpret this behavior as these two women are friends, possibly they're related to one another. If we take a look at the top right-hand picture, which is two men who are engaged in sort of an embrace, culturally we may interpret touch between two men differently than touch between two women. And possibly with this picture we may infer that these two gentlemen have a romantic relationship with each other. Finally, let's take a look at the picture on the bottom, which again conveys touch between two males. But based on the other factors that we see in the picture, one is in a football uniform, his head down, the other one putting his hand on his shoulder, we probably wouldn't imply any type of romantic relationship between these two males, but probably would infer that one person is consoling the other person based on the other information that we have in this picture. The next type of nonverbal communication we'll take a look at is paralanguage. And these are aspects of the voice that convey messages. So you might say, well, we said nonverbal communication is communication without words. And that's true, but there are aspects of our voice above and beyond the words that we say that convey different messages. We can take a look at the volume, the pitch, how high or low our voice is, the rate at which we speak, and these all can change the message of the words that we use. So let's take a look at one phrase, and we'll place the emphasis on different words in this phrase and see how the meaning of the message changes. The first phrase is, I can't believe what she said. The emphasis on the I, meaning for me, what this person said is somewhat unbelievable. Let's change the emphasis in the sentence. I can't believe what she said. So we change the emphasis to the believe, and we focus more on our disbelief rather than focusing on whether I believe it or whether someone else believes it. Let's change the emphasis one more time. I can't believe what she said. So the emphasis placed on the object, she, and clearly the focus of the sentence is on that object. So just a few examples of how saying something differently can change the meaning of that particular message. Next, let's take a look at space, how we use space. And proxemics is the study of how we use space. We can take a look at space as far as distancing from individuals, and the interplay text identifies 4 distinct distances. Intimate distance is touch to 18 inches, personal distance 18 inches to 4 feet, social distance from 4 feet to 12 feet, and public distance from 12 feet to 25 feet. So we take a look at how we distance ourselves from one another, and this type of distancing conveys different messages about the relationship. Let's take a look at the next picture. 2 men sitting on a bench. We might ask the question, why are they not sitting right next to each other? Well, probably we would infer that these 2 men probably don't know one another, so they want to maintain some distance between one another. And we even see that in the middle of the bench, one of them has placed a briefcase to maintain that separation, that space between themselves. In the next picture, we see a man and a woman. Clearly an intimate distance. They're touching one another. We can take a look at the eye contact that they're making with one another. And we probably would infer from this distancing that these two people have an intimate relationship. Finally, let's take a look at clothing. The clothing that we wear can send so many different messages that we may not even be aware of. Here's just a few examples of how clothing can send particular messages. The clothing that you wear may convey if you're trustworthy. It may convey your socioeconomic status, your educational level, your moral character as far as what you keep covered up and what you don't, and also your social status. Let's take a look at these two pictures and look at how these individuals are dressed differently and the different messages that it may convey. In the left-hand picture, we see two people sitting at a table, the man in a suit and a tie, the woman also in a business suit. We probably would infer that these two are professionals. We would probably believe that they are of a moderate or high socioeconomic status, as related to the person on the right, who clearly is dressed in some type of uniform. We probably would imply that this person works at a fast food restaurant, which would give us different messages about his socioeconomic status. So in review, in today's key concept presentation, we've taken a look at the definition of nonverbal communication, and we've also taken a look at different types of nonverbal communication. It's very important for you to remember that it is impossible to not communicate.